The arrival. The massive docking bay of Starbase Zeta-9 bustled with activity as beings from across the galaxy scurried about their business. Amidst the cacophony of alien languages and the hum of advanced technology, a lone human strode confidently through the crowd, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder. Captain Jane Carter, recently appointed human liaison to the Galactic Peacekeeping Force, GPF, took in the sights with a mix of wonder and amusement. The aliens around her ranged from vaguely humanoid to utterly bizarre, some floating, others slithering, and a few that seemed to exist in more dimensions than she could perceive. As she approached the check-in desk, a tall, willowy alien with iridescent skin and 4 arms regarded her with a mixture of curiosity and trepidation. "Greetings, Earth being," it said, its voice a melodious trill. "I am Xylith, your assigned orientation guide. Welcome to Starbase Zeta-9." Jane grinned, extending a hand. "Nice to meet you, Xylith. I'm Captain Jane Carter, but please, call me Jane." Xylith stared at the outstretched hand, uncertainty clear in its large, multifaceted eyes. After a moment's hesitation, it gingerly took Jane's hand with one of its lower arms. "Fascinating," it murmured. "I've read about this Earth custom. Is the grip strength satisfactory?" Laughing, Jane gave Xylith's hand a gentle shake before releasing it. "Perfect. So, what's first on the agenda? I'm eager to get started." As they made their way through the starbase, Xylith briefed Jane on her upcoming duties and the various species she'd be working with. The alien seemed increasingly perplexed by Jane's laid-back attitude and constant questions. "And here is the training facility," Xylith announced as they entered a vast, high-ceilinged room filled with strange equipment and holographic projections. "This is where GPF members hone their skills for various planetary conditions and potential confrontations." Jane's eyes lit up as she took in the array of alien technology. "Oh, this is going to be fun," she said, rubbing her hands together. Xylith's brow ridges furrowed. "Fun. Captain Carter, this is serious business. The simulations here can be quite dangerous." "The best kind of fun usually is," Jane replied with a wink. Before Xylith could respond, alarms began blaring throughout the station. Red lights flashed, and a computerized voice spoke in multiple languages. "Alert! Containment breach in Sector 7. Carnivorous Zorblaks has escaped. All personnel evacuate immediately." As aliens around them began to panic and flee, Jane's posture straightened, her eyes narrowing with focus. "Zorblaks? What's that?" she asked Xylith, who was already backing away towards the exit. "A highly dangerous predator from the death world of Nix 5. Xylith explained, voice quavering. "Its hide is impervious to most energy weapons, and its claws can shred through durasteel. We must evacuate immediately." But Jane was already moving in the opposite direction, towards the source of the commotion. "Sounds like you folks could use a hand. Where's Sector 7? Xylith's eyes widened in disbelief. "Captain Carter, you can't be serious. The Zorblaks will tear you apart." Jane flashed a confident smile. "Maybe, but I'd wrestled gators back home. How much worse could this be? Besides, isn't this what the Galactic Peacekeeping Force is all about?" Before Xylith could protest further, Jane had disappeared down the corridor, leaving the alien sputtering in astonishment. As Jane raced through the emptying halls of the starbase, she could hear the sounds of destruction growing louder. Rounding a corner, she came face to face with the Zorblaks. The creature was a nightmarish fusion of reptile and insect, standing over 3 meters tall on 6 powerful legs. Its elongated head housed rows of serrated teeth, and its carapace gleamed like polished obsidian. As it turned to face Jane, she could see the remains of several security drones scattered around its feet. "Well, aren't you a beauty?" Jane muttered, slowly circling the beast. The Zorblaks let out a bone-chilling shriek in charge. At the last possible moment, Jane dove to the side, rolling to her feet as the creature crashed into the wall behind her. As it shook off its disorientation, Jane's mind raced, taking in her surroundings and formulating a plan. She spotted a fire suppression system on the ceiling and grinned. "Hey, ugly," she shouted, drawing the Zorblax's attention. "Bet you can't catch me." Leading the creature on a wild chase through the station, Jane finally maneuvered it into position. With a well-aimed throw of a piece of debris, she triggered the fire suppression system. A torrent of foam engulfed the Zorblax, causing it to thrash and shriek in confusion. Taking advantage of its disorientation, Jane leaped onto the creature's back, wrapping her arms around its neck in a chokehold. The Zorblax bucked and spun, trying to dislodge her, but Jane held on with grim determination. "Easy there, big fella," she grunted, tightening her grip. "Just go to sleep. That's it." Gradually, the Zorblax's struggles weakened, and it slumped to the ground unconscious. Jane rolled off its back, panting but grinning triumphantly. It was at this moment that Syleth arrived with a team of heavily armed security personnel. They stared in shock at the scene before them. A small human standing victorious over the dreaded Zorblax. "Captain Carter," Syleth said, mandibles quivering in disbelief. How did you?" Jane shrugged, brushing foam from her uniform. "Like I said, not too different from gator wrestling. Though I'll admit, this fella put up more of a fight. Say, is there a gym around here? I could use a cool down after that little workout." As the security team moved in to secure the Zorblax, murmurs of awe and disbelief spread through the gathered aliens. Syleth approached Jane, its previous trepidation replaced with a mix of respect and curiosity. "Captain Carter," it said solemnly, "I believe I owe you an apology. I severely underestimated your capabilities. Perhaps there is much we can learn from humans after all." Jane clapped Syleth on the shoulder, causing the alien to flinch slightly. "No apologies necessary, friend. Now how about you show me where I can grab a bite to eat? Wrangling giant alien monsters really works up an appetite." As they walked away from the scene, leaving behind a wake of astonished aliens, Syleth found itself reevaluating everything it thought it knew about humans. It was clear that Captain Jane Carter's arrival marked the beginning of a new and exciting era for the Galactic Peacekeeping Force. Little did they know, this was just the beginning of the changes that humanity would bring to the galactic stage. The challenge. Word had spread quickly through Starbase Zeta 9 about Captain Jane Carter's encounter with the Zorblax. As she entered the bustling mess hall the next morning, conversations hushed and alien heads turned to stare. Jane, seemingly oblivious to the attention, made her way to the food synthesizers with a spring in her step. "Let's see what passes for coffee in this neck of the woods," she muttered, eyeing the unfamiliar selections on the synthesizer's menu. A tentacled alien approached, its skin shifting through a kaleidoscope of colors. "Captain Carter," it burbled, "I am Commander Zexterra of the Diplomatic Corps. Your actions yesterday were most impressive." Jane grinned, clutching a mug of something that smelled vaguely coffee-like. "Thanks, Commander. Just doing my job. Though I've got to say that Zorblax was a lot more fun than the paperwork I was expecting on my first day." Zexterra's tentacles writhed in what might have been amusement or confusion. "Yes, well, about that. Your unorthodox approach has caused quite a stir. The High Council is concerned about potential diplomatic incidents." Concerned? Jane raised an eyebrow. "I thought they'd be pleased. Crisis averted, no casualties, minimal property damage. Sounds like a win to me." "Indeed," Zexterra agreed, its skin settling into a deep blue. "However, they feel that such direct intervention might be seen as aggressive by some member species. They've suggested that perhaps you might benefit from some additional cultural sensitivity training." Jane took a sip of her pseudo-coffee and grimaced. "With all due respect, Commander, I don't think any amount of training would have helped me talk the Zorblax into its cage. Sometimes, direct action is necessary." Before Zexterra could respond, alarms blared throughout the station. A holographic display materialized in the center of the mess hall, showing a massive spacecraft approaching the starbase. "Attention all personnel," a computerized voice announced. "Unidentified vessel approaching. Shield strength at maximum. Prepare for possible hostilities." The mess hall erupted into chaos as aliens scrambled to their stations. Jane set down her mug and turned to Zextera. "Looks like we might have another situation on our hands. Where do you need me?" Zextera's tentacles twisted anxiously. "The command center, but Captain Carter, please remember, diplomacy first. We cannot risk." Jane was already sprinting towards the exit. "Got it. Diplomacy first, gator wrestling second." When Jane arrived at the command center, she found it in a state of controlled panic. Aliens of various species manned consoles, chattering in a mix of languages as they tried to make sense of the situation. At the center of it all stood Admiral Kivlix, a towering insectoid being with gleaming carapace and compound eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. "Report," he chittered. A small, gelatinous alien wobbled as it spoke. "The vessel appears to be of Drakari origin, Admiral. They're not responding to hails." Jane stepped forward. "The Drakari. I've read about them. Warrior culture, big on honor and ritual combat." "Right." Admiral Kivlix's antennae twitched in surprise. "Correct, Captain Carter. I'm impressed by your knowledge. The Drakari are indeed formidable warriors, and we've had difficulties with them in the past." As if on cue, the main view screen flickered to life, revealing a fearsome Drakari warrior. Its scaled skin was a deep crimson, and wickedly curved horns protruded from its skull. "I am Warlord Xorak of the Drakari Imperium," the alien growled. "We have come to challenge the so-called Galactic Peacekeeping Force. Send forth your mightiest warrior to face our champion in single combat, or we will consider it an act of cowardice and open fire on your station." The command center fell silent, tension thick in the air. Admiral Kivlix's mandibles clicked nervously. "This is most irregular. Surely we can come to a diplomatic—" "I'll do it," Jane interrupted, stepping forward. All eyes in the command center turned to her in shock. Admiral Kivlix's compound eyes seemed to bulge even further. "Captain Carter, you can't be serious. The Drakari are renowned for their combat prowess. Their champion Wold." Jane grinned, cracking her knuckles. "With all due respect, Admiral, I didn't join the GPF to sit behind a desk. Besides, I've been itching for a proper workout since I got here." Before anyone could protest further, Jane addressed the view screen. "Warlord Xorak, I accept your challenge on behalf of the Galactic Peacekeeping Force." The Drakari warlord's eyes narrowed, taking in Jane's comparatively small stature. "A human. You mock us by sending such a fragile creature to face our champion." "Trust me, big guy," Jane replied with a wink. "I'm tougher than I look. Now, what are the terms of this little duel?" Xorak bared his fangs in what might have been a smile. "The combat will take place in the Crucible of Karthok, an ancient arena aboard our vessel. The rules are simple. Fight until one combatant yields or is no longer able to continue. Victory will be recognized as a show of strength for the winning side." Jane nodded. "Sounds straightforward enough. When do we start?" "We will dock with your station in one planetary rotation," Xorak growled. "Prepare yourself, human. Our champion has never known defeat." As the transmission cut off, the command center erupted into frantic discussion. Admiral Kivlix approached Jane, his antennae twitching agitatedly. "Captain Carter, while your bravery is commendable, this is utter madness. The Drakari champion will be a formidable opponent, trained in combat since birth. We cannot risk." Jane held up a hand, silencing the Admiral. "With all due respect, sir, we don't have much choice. If we refuse, they'll attack the station. This way, we at least have a fighting chance." She turned to address the room at large. "Now, I've got about 24 hours to prepare. I need everything we have on Drakari physiology, fighting styles, and this Crucible of Karthok. Let's turn this challenge into an opportunity to show the galaxy what humans are made of. As the command center sprang into action, Jane couldn't help but feel a thrill of excitement. This was why she had joined the GPF, for the chance to face the unknown, to test herself against the best the galaxy had to offer. Little did the Drakari know, they were about to learn firsthand why humans had quickly gained a reputation as one of the most adaptable and resilient species in the known universe. As Jane left the command center to begin her preparations, she muttered to herself with a grin, "Now this is what I call a proper welcome to the galactic community." The preparation. The next 24 hours on Starbase Zeta 9 were a whirlwind of activity. As news of Jane's acceptance of the Drakari challenge spread, the station buzzed with a mixture of anxiety, excitement, and disbelief. Aliens from every corner of the galaxy found excuses to pass by the training facilities, hoping to catch a glimpse of the human who dared to face the infamous Drakari champion. Jane, for her part, threw herself into preparations with gusto. The large training hall had been cleared for her use, and she stood at its center, surrounded by holographic displays showing everything from Drakari anatomy to historical footage of their combat techniques. Xylith entered the room, carrying a stack of data pads. "Captain Carter, I've brought the additional information you requested on Drakari cultural rituals, and what in the name of the 7 moons are you doing?" Jane was balanced on one foot atop a small platform, juggling what appeared to be 3 active plasma grenades. "Reflex training," she said casually, not taking her eyes off the dangerous objects arsing through the air. "Gotta keep the mind and body sharp." Xylith's iridescent skin paled considerably. "Those aren't real plasma grenades, are they?" With a series of quick movements, Jane deactivated the grenades and hopped down from the platform. "Of course they are. No point in training with fake ones, right? Now, what have you got for me?" As Tylith shakily handed over the data pads, a booming voice echoed through the room. "Most impressive, human." Admiral Kivlik strode in, accompanied by a delegation of alien officials. "Though I must insist you refrain from using live ordnance in the training facilities." Jane shrugged, a mischievous glint in her eye. "Just keeping everyone on their toes, Admiral. Besides, I figured if I'm going to face a Drakari champion, I should be prepared for anything." A small, avian alien with brilliantly colored feathers stepped forward, introducing itself as Dr. Zikzik, the station's xenobiologist. "Captain Carter, I've analyzed the Drakari physiological data. Their strength and endurance far exceed human norms. In a straight contest of brute force, I fear you would be severely outmatched." "Good thing I'm not planning on a straight contest then," Jane replied with a wink. "Now tell me more about their vulnerabilities. Any weak spots we can exploit." As the group huddled around the holographic displays, discussing strategy and tactics, a commotion at the entrance drew their attention. A massive, lumbering creature that looked like a cross between a bear and a rhinoceros squeezed through the door, followed by a small reptilian alien. "Ah, excellent," Admiral Kivlik exclaimed. "Captain Carter, allow me to introduce Grok, our Ursuloid combat instructor, and Shithis, our Serpentian flexibility expert. They volunteered to assist in your training." Jane's face lit up with excitement. "Now we're talking. Grok, buddy, how do you feel about a little sparring match?" The Ursuloid let out a rumbling growl that might have been a chuckle. "Little human have big spirit. Grok-like. We fight now." As Jane and Grok squared off in the center of the room, the assembled aliens watched with a mixture of fascination and horror. What followed was a whirlwind of action that left most observers struggling to keep up. Despite Grok's enormous size advantage, Jane moved with a speed and agility that seemed to defy physics. She darted in and out of the Ursuloid's reach, landing quick strikes and evading powerful blows that could have easily crushed her. At one point, Jane actually ran up Grok's massive arm, used his shoulder as a springboard, and landed a solid kick to the back of his head before flipping away to safety. The Ursuloid staggered, more surprised than hurt, and let out a booming laugh. Little human fight good. Gruk not have this much fun in years. As the sparring match concluded, Jane barely seemed winded. She turned to the astonished onlookers with a grin. So, who's next? Sithis, how about you show me some of those flexibility techniques? The next several hours were a blur of intense training exercises, strategy sessions, and impromptu demonstrations of human ingenuity. Jane absorbed every bit of information thrown her way, combining it with her own unorthodox ideas to create a fighting style unlike anything the aliens had ever seen. As the training session wound down, Admiral Kivlix approached Jane, his antennae twitching with a mixture of concern and admiration. Captain Carter, your skills are remarkable. But I must ask, are you certain you wish to go through with this? The Drakari champion will still pose an enormous threat. Jane wiped sweat from her brow, her eyes gleaming with determination. Admiral, back on Earth we have a saying, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. Trust me, I've got a few tricks up my sleeve that our Drakari friends won't see coming. Just then, alarms blared throughout the station. The computerized voice announced, "Attention all personnel. Drakari vessel has arrived and is requesting docking clearance. All non-essential staff, please clear the main docking bay." A hush fell over the training room. The moment of truth had arrived. Jane took a deep breath, rolled her shoulders, and flashed a confident smile to her alien colleagues. "Well, folks, looks like it's showtime. Don't suppose anyone wants to place a friendly wager on the outcome." As the group made their way to the docking bay, a palpable sense of tension filled the air. The fate of not just the station, but potentially the entire galactic peacekeeping force, rested on the shoulders of this lone human. Yet as they watched Jane stride confidently towards the airlock, ready to meet her Drakari opponent, many found themselves filled with an emotion they hadn't expected. Hope. For in Jane Carter, they saw a spirit that embodied the very best of what the Galactic Peacekeeping Force stood for: courage, adaptability, and an unwavering determination to face any challenge head-on. As the massive Drakari warship loomed outside the station's viewports, one thing became clear to all who watched. Win or lose, this battle would go down in galactic history. The battle. The docking bay of Starbase Zeta 9 was a study in contrasts. On one side stood the assembled representatives of the Galactic Peacekeeping Force, a diverse array of alien species, each unique in their own right. On the other, the Drakari delegation emerged from their ship, a sea of crimson scales and gleaming armor that seemed to radiate an aura of menace. At the forefront of the GPF group stood Jane Carter, looking almost comically small next to the towering alien dignitaries. Yet there was nothing comical about the determined set of her jaw or the confident gleam in her eyes. Warlord Xorak stomped forward, his massive frame dwarfing even his own warriors. His gaze swept dismissively over the assembled aliens before settling on Jane. "So, the humans send a female to face our champion. Your species continues to confound us with its foolishness." Jane stepped forward, meeting the warlord's gaze unflinchingly. "Where I come from, we judge warriors by their actions, not their appearance. But if you're having second thoughts, I'd understand. Your champion must be pretty nervous, facing an unknown opponent and all." A ripple of shocked murmurs ran through both delegations. Xorak's eyes narrowed dangerously, but then he threw back his head and let out a booming laugh. "You have spirit, little human. It will be a pleasure to watch Grokthar crush it out of you." As if summoned by his name, a mountain of muscle and scales pushed through the Drakari ranks. Grokthar, the undefeated champion, stood nearly 3 meters tall, his body a mass of scars and brutal-looking cybernetic enhancements. Jane tilted her head back to meet the champion's gaze, a smirk playing at the corners of her mouth. "Well, aren't you a big fellow? I don't suppose you'd consider arm wrestling instead of mortal combat." Grokthar's response was a guttural growl that sent shivers down the spines of many onlookers. Admiral Kivlik stepped forward, his antennae twitching nervously. If both combatants are ready, we shall proceed to the crucible of Karathok aboard the Drakari vessel. As the two delegations made their way through the connecting airlock and into the cavernous Drakari warship, Jane found herself walking alongside Silith. "Captain Carter," the alien whispered, its iridescent skin shifting through anxious patterns, "are you certain you don't wish to reconsider? There's no shame in." Jane patted Silith's arm reassuringly. "Relax, my friend. I've got this under control. Just make sure you've got a good view of the action. You won't want to miss this." The crucible of Karathok was a massive arena at the heart of the Drakari ship. Tiered seating surrounded a central fighting pit, which was little more than bare metal flooring surrounded by crackling energy fields. Weapons of various kinds lined the walls, a grisly reminder of the battles that had taken place here over the centuries. As Jane and Grokthar took their positions at opposite ends of the arena, Warlord Xorak's voice boomed out. "The rules are simple. The battle continues until one combatant yields or is no longer able to fight. Choose your weapons, and may the strongest warrior prevail." Grokthar immediately stomped to the weapon wall, selecting a massive war hammer that looked like it could crush a small vehicle. He swung it experimentally, the air whistling around the deadly weapon. All eyes turned to Jane, who stood calmly in the center of the arena, making no move towards the weapons. "I'm good, thanks," she called out, rolling her shoulders and bouncing lightly on her toes. "Wouldn't want to make this unfair, you know." A confused murmur ran through the crowd. Even Grokthar paused, his reptilian features contorting in what might have been confusion. Warlord Xorak leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. "You dare mock our sacred combat rituals. Choose a weapon, human, or forfeit your life." Jane shrugged, a mischievous glint in her eye. "If you insist." She walked to the weapon wall, and after a moment's consideration, selected what appeared to be a small dagger, barely the length of her forearm. "This should do nicely." The Drakari erupted in raucous laughter, while the GPF delegation watched in horror. Admiral Kivlix buried his face in his hands, antennae drooping in despair. As Jane returned to the center of the arena, Warlord Xorak raised his arms for silence. "Let the combat begin." Grokthar wasted no time, charging forward with a roar that shook the very foundations of the ship. His warhammer opposleaf whistled through the air, descending towards Jane with bone-crushing force. But Jane wasn't there. With a grace that seemed to defy physics, she sidestepped the blow at the last possible second. The warhammer struck the floor with a resounding clang, leaving a sizable dent in the metal. "Ooh, so close," Jane taunted, dancing just out of Grokthar's reach. "Want to try that again? I'll give you a free shot." The Drakari champion roared in fury, launching into a series of devastating attacks. Each time, Jane seemed to slip away at the last moment, her movements fluid and unpredictable. As the battle wore on, it became clear that Jane's strategy was working. Grokthar's attacks grew wilder, less coordinated, as frustration and fatigue began to set in. Seizing an opening, Jane darted in close, her small dagger flashing. There was a spark, and suddenly one of Grokthar's cybernetic enhancements began to sputter and smoke. The crowd gasped. Somehow, in the midst of avoiding those devastating blows, Jane had managed to identify and target a weak point in her opponent's augmentations. Grokthar staggered, off balance and in rage. He swept his warhammer in a wide arc, putting all his considerable strength behind the blow. This time, instead of dodging, Jane dropped and rolled towards her opponent. The warhammer whistled harmlessly overhead as she came up inside Grokthar's guard. In a move that left spectators baffled, she leaped up, using the Drakari's own armor as handholds to scramble up his massive frame. Before Grokthar could react, Jane had reached his shoulders. With a quick movement, she jammed her small dagger into a barely visible seam where the champion's armor met his scales. There was a crackle of electricity, and Grokthar's entire body went rigid. His muscles spasmed, and the massive warhammer slipped from nerveless fingers. As the Drakari champion toppled like a felled tree, Jane rode him down, leaping clear at the last moment to land in a graceful crouch. The arena fell silent, every being present struggling to process what they had just witnessed. Jane stood, brushing herself off casually. She looked down at the twitching form of Grokthar, then up at the stunned face of Warlord Xorak. "So," she said with a grin, "does this mean I win?" The aftermath. The silence that had fallen over the crucible of Karathok was shattered by a cacophony of shocked exclamations, roars of disbelief, and the occasional sound of credits changing hands as the few brave souls who had bet on Jane collected their winnings. Warlord Xorak's face was a study in conflicting emotions, rage, disbelief, and something that might have been a grudging respect. He stomped down to the arena floor, looming over Jane, who stood her ground unflinchingly. "How?" the Drakari leader demanded. "How did a puny human defeat our mightiest warrior?" Jane shrugged, twirling her small dagger casually. "Where I come from, we have a saying: work smarter, not harder. Your champion relied on brute strength. I used my brain." She tapped her temple for emphasis. Plus, a little research into Drakari cybernetics went a long way. Xorak's eyes narrowed. "You studied us. Prepared specifically for this fight." "Of course," Jane replied. "Did you think I was just going to waltz in here and wing it? That would be disrespectful to your warrior culture, don't you think?" For a moment, it seemed as though Xorak might explode with rage. Then, to everyone's surprise, he threw back his head and let out a booming laugh that echoed through the arena. "Clever. Very clever, little human." He clapped Jane on the shoulder with enough force to stagger a lesser being. "You have proven yourself a worthy warrior indeed. The Drakari respect strength, but we also respect cunning. You have shown both." As medical teams rushed to attend to the still-twitching Grokthar, Admiral Kivlix cautiously approached. "Then, the challenge has been met. The Galactic Peacekeeping Force's honor is satisfied." Xorak nodded solemnly. "It is done. Your champion has proven her worth. The Drakari will withdraw our objections to your presence in this sector." A cheer went up from the GPF delegation, while the Drakari warriors pounded their chests in a gesture of respect. As the two groups began to mingle, the tension of earlier replaced by a cautious camaraderie, Jane found herself surrounded by her awestruck colleagues. Syleth's skin was cycling through a rainbow of excited colors. Captain Carter, that was. "I've never seen anything like it. How did you know which cybernetic implant to target?" Jane grinned. "Remember all those historical combat footage you provided? I noticed a pattern in how Drakari champions moved. Figured there had to be a weak point in the interface between their organic and cybernetic systems. After that, it was just a matter of getting close enough to exploit it." Admiral Kivlix chittered excitedly. "Remarkable. Simply remarkable. Captain Carter, I believe I owed you an apology. Your unorthodox methods have proven far more effective than we could have imagined." Before Jane could respond, a groan from nearby drew their attention. Grokthar was sitting up, aided by medics, his cybernetics slowly coming back online. To everyone's surprise, Jane walked over and extended a hand to the fallen champion. "A big guy. No hard feelings, right? That was one heck of a fight." Grokthar stared at the offered hand for a long moment, then grasped it in his own massive paw. As Jane helped him to his feet, the Drakari champion spoke, his voice a gravelly rumble. "Small human fight with honor. Grokthar learned much today." As news of the unusual duel spread throughout the station and beyond, it marked a turning point in intergalactic relations. The story of how a lone human had outsmarted and outfought the dreaded Drakari champion became the stuff of legend, retold in countless variations across the galaxy. In the days that followed, Jane found herself at the center of a diplomatic whirlwind. Species that had previously been wary of human involvement in galactic affairs now clamored for cultural exchanges and joint training exercises. Even the Drakari, true to their warrior code, expressed interest in learning more about human combat techniques and strategy. Warlord Sorak himself requested Jane's presence as an honored guest at the next Drakari War Games. As Jane stood in the observation deck of Starbase Zeta 9, watching ships from a dozen different species dock and depart, she felt a presence beside her. It was Tyleth, looking uncharacteristically contemplative. "You've changed things, you know," the alien said softly. "In just a few short days, you've reshaped perceptions across the galaxy. Many species are reconsidering their views on humans and on the true meaning of strength." Jane smiled, her gaze fixed on the stars beyond. "That's why I joined the Galactic Peacekeeping Force, Tyleth. Not just to explore strange new worlds, but to bridge the gaps between species, to show that our differences can be our greatest strength when we work together." She turned to her alien friend, a twinkle in her eye. "Besides, someone's got to keep this galaxy on its toes. Now, what do you say we hit the training room? I've got some great ideas for improving our zero-G combat protocols." As the human and alien walked off together, their laughter echoing through the corridors of the starbase, it was clear that a new era of galactic cooperation had begun. And at its heart was a small, unassuming human who had proven that sometimes the greatest adventures come in the most unexpected packages. The legend of Jane Carter, the human who treated a gladiatorial duel as a warm-up, would be told and retold across the stars for generations to come. It served as a reminder to all species that in the vast, unpredictable expanse of the universe, it was not the strongest or the most technologically advanced who would thrive, but those who could adapt, innovate, and find strength in diversity. And somewhere out there, in the depths of space, Jane Carter was already looking forward to her next challenge.